This is London, capital of the United Kingdom, one of the wealthiest cities on the planet, an economy worth more than $500 billion on its own. If London were its own country, it would rank as the 26th largest economy in the world, right alongside Norway. For nearly 2 centuries, it's been the beating heart of European finance, home to some of the highest wages anywhere in the region. But behind that glittering surface sits a very different city. In 2023, London's own councils estimated that more than 1 in 50 residents are homeless, a figure that's climbed over 50% in just a decade. Britain now has the highest homelessness rate in the entire developed world. And through all of that, real wages, what people actually take home after inflation, have barely moved in 15 years. People today are earning roughly what they earned back in 2008, while the cost of nearly everything, especially housing, has climbed and climbed. So it's no great mystery why people are leaving. A young professional could earn more than double the salary in New York compared to London, while the cost of living there is only about a third higher. Every year, more of Britain's skilled young workers pack up for somewhere else, and nowhere feels that loss more than the National Health Service, watching doctors and nurses walk away from poor pay, brutal hours, and conditions that keep getting worse. And here's the strange twist. More people are immigrating into the UK for work than ever before. Most come for its world-class universities, but research from 2015 found something telling. The people leaving Britain tend to be significantly more skilled than the people arriving. Swap out skilled workers for less skilled ones on a national scale, and productivity suffers, and so does the quality of everything the economy produces. So why would a country that looks this wealthy be losing so many of its brightest people? A big part of it is simple. Living standards have been quietly eroding year after year, and that's the exact reason most people cite when they leave. Strip London's output and population out of the picture entirely, and British living standards drop by 14%, worse at that point than Mississippi, the lowest-ranked state in the entire United States by that measure. In 2007, the average British household was 8% worse off than its neighbors in northwestern Europe. 15 years later, that gap has widened to a record 20%. At the current pace, the average Slovenian household will out-earn its British counterpart by 2024, and Poland will catch up by the end of the decade. And this pain isn't spread evenly. Britain's top earners still rank 5th in the region for living standards, but the average household has slipped to 12th, and the poorest 5% sit at 15th. Last year, Britain's lowest-earning households were living 20% worse than their counterparts in Slovenia. More people arriving, fewer skilled workers staying, public services stretched thinner every year. A paradox with no easy fix. So let's actually dig into why this is happening to one of the richest countries on Earth, and why so many people suddenly want out. Before we get into that, a quick word from today's sponsor, Incogni. If you spend much time online, your personal data has almost certainly ended up scattered across the internet. Every purchase, every account you create feeds a network of data brokers who collect, package, and sell that information to buyers everywhere. And the more hands your data passes through, the easier it becomes for someone to steal it. I've had my own data stolen before, and it is a genuine headache to untangle. There are entire websites where anyone can type in a name and pull up an address, a phone number, an employer, even details about someone's children. And while these sites promise not to enable stalking or harassment, there's little stopping misuse once the data is out there. Incogni goes directly to those brokers on your behalf and requests your information be removed, handling any pushback for you. It's fully automated. You just create an account, grant access, and let it run in the background while your data quietly disappears from the web. Head to incogni.com.
Back to Britain. It wasn't long ago that this country was one of the most attractive places on earth for young, ambitious talent, and a lot of people still feel that. A recent poll found 60% of respondents believe life was simply better in the 90s and the 2000s than it is today. That era gets remembered fondly for good reason. Bands like Oasis and the Spice Girls were topping charts around the world. The whole country rode a wave of cool Britannia optimism, and the end of the Cold War added to a broader, global sense that things were only going to get better. People always romanticize the past a little, but the 90s really were a genuine high point economically. After a rocky start, the fallout from the exchange rate mechanism crisis, and an early recession, Britain settled into its longest uninterrupted stretch of growth since the Second World War. Structural reform, smart monetary policy, and favorable global conditions all lined up. The financial sector led the charge. Credit expanded rapidly, especially in property lending,
and that fueled consumer spending and investment. Regulatory changes made Britain an appealing place for outside investment too. But underneath that shine, the country kept shifting toward a service-based economy, and that shift didn't replace the broad employment that heavy industry and mining once provided, especially in poorer regions far from London's glow. Growth carried on through the decade, but by the mid-2000s, cracks were already forming, and the 2008 financial crisis tore them wide open, exposing just how dependent Britain had become on financial services and how little it had invested elsewhere. Today, the country is wrestling with an overstretched health service, a housing affordability crisis, and aging infrastructure, all rooted in decisions made decades ago. And housing might be the sharpest pain point of all. It isn't just that homes are unaffordable, there simply aren't enough of them. First-time buyers now need an income far above average or direct financial help from family just to get a foot on the property ladder. Britain has consistently built fewer homes than its growing population needs, hemmed in by restrictive planning laws, thin public housing funding, and decades of other priorities taking precedence over building homes. Some of this traces back to the late 1970s when the Right to Buy scheme let public housing tenants purchase their homes at a discount. At the time, it felt genuinely progressive, opening homeownership to people who'd never dreamed of it. But those homes were never replaced fast enough, and the social housing stock has shrunk by roughly 25% since then, even as the population kept growing. With fewer social homes available, more families were pushed into the private rental market, driving rents higher and hitting lower-income households hardest, forced to compete for whatever affordable options remain. On top of that, house prices have outpaced real wages for more than 30 years, carving an ever-widening gap between those who own property and those who don't. England now has 1.4 million fewer households in social housing than it did in 1980, while inequality, measured by the Gini coefficient, keeps climbing. Overcrowding has become common in both private and social housing, and increasingly, families are being pushed into a form of homelessness that stays largely hidden from public view: temporary accommodation. After years of decline, the number of English households stuck in temporary housing more than doubled between 2010 and 2023, from 48,000 to 112,000, the highest figure on record. Conditions in these placements are frequently grim: damp, mold, pest infestations. Being shuttled from place to place disrupts everything. Adults drop out of work, children drop out of school, and social mobility erodes further for people already struggling to climb out. Local councils spent almost £1.8 billion last year on emergency shelter alone, more than double what it cost in real terms a decade ago. Three forces are driving this: not nearly enough homes being built, a shrinking social housing sector, and steadily eroding financial support for anyone who can't afford market rent. None of this is likely to improve soon, and it's the young who feel it hardest.
Older generations disproportionately own second homes, while young adults today are far less likely to own even one, and far more likely to rent indefinitely. It's the collision of stagnant wages against soaring property values, widening the wealth gap further. Slower growth also means fewer chances to climb the career ladder early, and that shows up in the numbers. People born in the 1980s are generally earning less by their early 30s than the generation before them. Unable to buy a home, watching their wages stall, it's little wonder Britain's most talented workers are looking toward the US, Australia, and New Zealand instead. Underneath the stagnant wages is a deeper problem: dwindling productivity, how efficiently a nation turns labor and capital into goods and services. Before 2008, UK productivity was growing at roughly 2% a year. After the crisis, that growth nearly flatlined. Since 2005, British companies have invested 20% less than their counterparts in the US, France, and Germany, placing the UK in the bottom 10% among developed economies. Less investment means outdated equipment, weaker innovation, and shrinking skill development across both industry and services, and that drags the whole economy's efficiency down with it. Nowhere is that strain clearer than in the National Health Service, established in 1948 as free healthcare at the point of access and a genuine point of national pride ever since. But as decades passed and Britain's population grew both larger and older, costs began spiraling even as the quality of care slipped. The number of people waiting for consultant treatment more than doubled in 9 years, from 3 million to 7.4 million. And survival rates for major conditions like heart disease, stroke, and cancer now trail most other developed nations, with the UK sitting among the lowest for colon and pancreatic cancer survival as of 2014. It would be easy to blame this purely on underfunding, and that's only part of the story.
Funding and staffing have actually increased since 2019, 11% higher in real terms by 2023, with 9% more senior doctors and 8% more nurses and health visitors, even accounting for staff sickness. So what's going wrong? An aging population needs more care. New treatments and technologies cost more. Drug prices keep climbing. Expectations for quality keep rising. And inflation is pushing up staff wages too. All of it adds up to what's sometimes called health inflation. Costs rising faster than funding can keep pace, leaving little left over for the long-term investment the system actually needs, because most of that new money simply covers today's rising operational costs instead. This underinvestment isn't unique to healthcare. It runs through transportation and public services across the country, and new infrastructure projects have become dramatically harder and more expensive to build in Britain than elsewhere. HS2, the high-speed rail line meant to connect northern and southern England, tells that story well. First proposed in 2019, it took over a decade just to break ground in 2020, by which point projected costs had ballooned from $37 billion to well over $100 billion, before large portions of the project were ultimately abandoned. Brexit has undoubtedly made things harder too, cutting trade with the UK's largest partner, the European Union, and that alone could fill an entire discussion on its own. But it isn't the sole cause of Britain's decline. Plenty of these same struggles show up across other European economies as well. The brain drain pulling talent away from Britain is driven by a much wider mix of forces, chiefly the pull of new opportunities and a better quality of life elsewhere. Looking back at that beloved decade, the 90s, the relentless focus on short-term economic wins often came at the cost of long-term infrastructure planning. Privatization was supposed to bring fresh capital into the system, but in practice it frequently led to underinvestment instead, as private companies prioritized profit over reinvesting in lasting improvements. And now, decades later, Britain is still paying that price. Even with the possibility of a new government on the horizon, there's little sign that things are about to turn around anytime soon.